Hello, my name is Evan Ronda. I bet you didn't even know what future pace was. I'm going to tell you just why it is relevant to you and why it might actually change your entire life forever. So I've been studying electronic music since about 2013, so for about 6 years, and I've been studying future bass specifically for about the last 4. Me and a couple of my peers have been really working on defining a lot of the terms of this specific genre and a little bit of its history. So I'm definitely one of the most prominent individuals that knows more about this genre than I would say a large portion of the world. And I'm going to go ahead and just start us off right here. So you might be wondering what future bass is. I'm sure you are. Future bass is almost a subgenre of electronic music. And so allow me to describe this for you. In the world, you have all music. No matter what it is, no matter what genre it is, any song that you ever listen to is going to fit into the genre of all music. And all music in the world can be split into one of 2 genres. It's a very binary option. Either it is not electronic or it is electronic. So today we're going to be focusing on the half that is electronic. And so within that half that I've presented for you, there's another subgenre called UK Garage. It's not very relevant, but within that subgenre, future bass exists. And future bass splits into 3 smaller genres that we're going to go over today. It's called first wave, second wave, and third wave. It's a terminology that I've coined that we've been floating around for a little while. But in essence, they are the time frames in which that genre existed and the mindset that went into creating those genres. And so how you can determine what future bass is, and in essence what that genre is all about, is it's all about being different, which is, it's a very blanket term, but in essence, future bass is a genre that means to be different than anything else before. So a good thing that I like to compare it to is jazz music. Just as jazz music was for the non-electronic genre back in the 1900s, future bass is today. Jazz music was created to break all the rules. They wanted to be different. They didn't want to follow anything that was already around, that was already established. Jazz music came around and said, hey, all these things that have already been put in place, all these things that you're used to and hearing in your music, we're going to disregard all of that. We're going to completely redefine the industry and create an entirely new genre where we do that. And that's exactly what future bass did. It took all the rules that exist in the genre of electronic music and it broke them and said, we're going to be different. So I'm going to have a little bit of this playing in the background as I explain to you a little bit more about what makes future bass future bass. So there are a couple keys here that describe future bass as a genre. And so I would say the number one thing that in essence is what future bass is, it's going to be some pulsing synthesizer sounds. And in layman's terms, it's the chords that go into creating the melody in the heart of that music. They have a very moving, breathing effect to them. And I'll be using that term a lot today. I almost think of it as a living, breathing music genre, and that it's pulsing in and out, like taking air in and taking air out. It's breathing. Something else is the chord structures are very intricate, especially near the beginning when future bass was first created. These chord structures are not stuff that you're going to hear in most pop music. They're very intricate, they're very detailed, and the way that the artists use them to convey emotion is very different and very original. Something else is a pitched sub-bass, which is in essence a very, very low hum. There's not very much texture to it or very much rhythm to it. In essence, it really just sets the tone for that key signature. It sets the tone for the song. You might have heard that in the song that I was playing in the background, very, very low hum. Something else that is used a lot in future bass is a lot of experimental sounds and experimental instruments. You're going to hear things in this genre that you probably wouldn't expect. A good example of that is Flume, one of the forefathers, I would say, one of the people that really created this genre. In one of his songs, he records the sound of him dropping a rock down a rain pipe. Pretty crazy. To the untrained ear, they probably wouldn't pick that up. But to the individual who knows what to listen for, has really studied that music, they'll hear that and they'll realize, wow, that's not just some sound effect he put in there. That's a real life sound. And most importantly, future bass artists really study the essence of sound itself. If you look at that wavetable down in the middle of the screen, you can see that those aren't just lines, right? That's not some cityscape or some mountainscape. That is sound graphed by lines over time. And while that might seem complicated, in essence, it really is just how sound works. And so the artists that create future bass have studied that and studied that and studied that. And they've really just mastered the art of creating sound and manipulating it to do their bidding. And so we're going to talk about the origin of future bass. The origin of future bass, I call it first wave future bass. It came out in the early 2010s. So about 2012 is when it really first started. It was created by people like Flume or Rusty or Cashmere Cat, most notably Flume though, and it wasn't very popular at the time. It was very underground. Those artists weren't going about for fame or fortune. They didn't create this genre because they thought it would make them famous. They created this genre because they wanted something different. They had a passion for music, and they weren't going to stop just because it wasn't popular or wasn't lucrative. They really wanted to create something new, and they had the tools to do that. And so some keys for early future bass or first wave future bass is a lot of distortion in those synths. I was talking about the synths a bit earlier, that high-end chord structure that really sets the tone, sets the mood. Well, within these earlier future bass songs, those chord structures that they used, the tone was a little bit unnerving. And it wasn't always in a creepy, spooky way. Sometimes it was just like, wow, that is different. I wasn't really used to hearing that. And I'll show you in a bit what I mean. But something else they would put in that music is vocal chops, which in essence is really just a vocal track that you chop up into smaller pieces and rearrange those pieces. And it still kind of sounds like somebody singing, but you don't really know what they're saying. It's just kind of words. And again, they really use these modulated versions of everyday songs, everyday sounds. And you might not recognize them if you're not really listening for it, but a lot of these songs in first wave future bass had everyday sound effects that were just recorded and put into these songs. So check out this example. This is going to be Flume, Holding On. And so you can really tell from that chord progression, it was a little different. It wasn't quite what you were used to. And the texture of those chords were a little bit distorted. And you didn't really know what the vocal person was saying. You didn't really know what those words were, but you could tell that it was somebody singing. And so first wave future bass was around for a little bit, but eventually it started to pick up some steam. And so when it did, it turned into second wave future bass. Second wave future bass is when the genre really took off, hit all the top charts. All these artists that were originally producing other genres, they picked up on this and they were like, hey, I see this genre, it's starting to catch some steam. I'm going to go ahead and start working on this and see what I can do to really perfect it. And so what they did is they found what was successful in first wave future bass and they kept it. And they almost made a formula. And so what you'll find with a lot of second wave future bass songs is they all sound very, very similar, especially to the untrained ear. They all have a very similar pattern that they fit, very similar formula and a very similar mold that they were all shaped from. They're all going to have an interesting 4-chord progression that's going to set the tone, and it's usually more of a lighter tone, but they're going to set the tone, put some texture in there, and then with that final chord, they're going to bring it home and bring some resolution. And so while it was adopted by a lot of popular producers, some of the most popular producers that picked it up would be Martin Garrix, Zedd, the Chainsmokers, Illenium. All these artists are world famous, traveling around the world, playing these songs at shows, and really helping this genre get exposed to the entire world. And because of that, artists from all over the world, and no matter how popular or unpopular they were, started to pick up on the genre and put their own little spin on it. And so some of the keys that you're going to find with the genre is, again, it's very consistent. There's not a lot of variance in between the songs. They all sound somewhat similar with their own little twist on them. There was not a lot of room for growth. There was not a lot of room for experimentation, but that's okay because the genre was already super popular, so there was not too much of a push to grow it. The one thing that second wave future bass did have that was picked up from first wave but fixed and almost evolved to become even better was those 5/7 and these minor 7, and the chords that they were put into the chord progressions weren't just regular 4 chords that you'd hear like on a piano. They were a little bit more emotional. So they would take a regular chord and they would add another note up at the top or near the bottom that would add a little bit of dissonance. And to the listener that doesn't really know what a 5/7 chord is, it's like, whoa, that chord had a little bit of something to it. I can't describe it, but it was weird. And so go ahead and check it out with some of these ones. So this song I'm going to play for you first is called Scared to Be Lonely. One of the most popular songs in the world when it came out. This is by Martin Garrix, and you might recognize it, you might not, but take a listen for 2 things. Number one is that pulsing, breathing chord progression in the upper end, and the lower end, that drum pattern that really drives the song. So check this out. So you can kind of hear that. In the upper end, you had that 4 chord progression where it started off with that first chord that set the tone. Second 2 chords gave it a little bit of emotion, a little bit of character. And that third one, or that fourth one, I should say, brought it home. So it was repeated twice throughout that one. Another example is going to be San Holo. Now, his music was a little bit less popular, but you can still tell that within second wave future bass, a lot of these songs had the same essence and the same sound. So again, listen for that pulsing, breathing high end and those drums to drive it in the low end. The final song I'm going to show you for second wave future bass is from an artist named Boombox Cartel. A lot of people don't know who they are, but the key is that no matter how popular you were, if you travel the whole world and you were one of the biggest names in the world, or if you were a smaller producer just trying to create some songs that you like, second wave future bass completely took over the music industry, absolutely took it over. And so you can hear again those pulsing, breathing high ends and those drums really pushing it in the low end. Check it out.
How to love.
You can also hear those vocal chops in that last song too. So after second wave future bass had been around for a while, people were starting to get kind of tired of it. They're like, hey, all this music is the same. We're really not really hearing a lot of new stuff. So there started to become a push for something new, something different. And that's where third wave future bass comes in. So third wave future bass was a kind of a revitalization where a lot of artists came out and they were like, hey, we're going to take this genre, we're going to push it, we're going to throw out everything, we're going to do something new with it. And like I said earlier, this is kind of where that jazz aspect came back in, where they took the rules that were already defined, this genre that already exists and is quite measurable, and they cast those rules aside and they created something new. And so with this genre, you saw the emergence of a couple other names like San Holo again, Odessa, R.L. Grime, and Flume came back again for third wave future bass. And he's been one of the most influential artists in really getting this genre to push and progress and evolve. And so with this genre, something else that you found is this hybridization. And when I say hybridization, what I mean is they took the genre and they melded it with some other genres all across the board. So they would mix it with electronic genres like trap, dubstep, house, but they would also mix it with genres completely outside of the electronic music spectrum like hip hop, rap, even country music. And it's very interesting that you can hear that, because while these genres might normally exist independently, what you find is as time progresses and these artists realize that there is this very, very prominent music genre that exists in future bass, they can learn from it and adapt it and bring it into their own music. So what you find is you have a genre that you're very familiar with, but you also have a little bit of an influence of something different, like those breathing, pulsing high-end synths and those drums in the low end to really drive the song. And so I'm going to show you a quick example of a San Holo song that is a really great example of hybridization, number one, and number two, really pushing the genre. So San Holo wanted to create a new sound, obviously, with third wave future bass, What he wanted to do is he wanted to take it far beyond what anybody thought possible, almost to a post-EDM standpoint. And that he had his electronic guitar, but he also had some future bass influence in the background. And so in this song, you're going to hear him with his guitar. You can hear a little bit of that future bass influence in the background. You're also going to hear a bit of a pedal steel, which is a very interesting instrument that you normally hear in islandy music. You almost think of like the Hawaiian music. So check this out. And so, having gone through those 3 different waves of future bass, you might be wondering, all right, well, how is this relevant? Well, first of all, let me show you this. So here are some other artists' examples. I talked about Odessa a little bit earlier. You also have the Glitch Mob and Boombox Cartel, who I also talked about earlier. Now, what's important here is these artists traveled, whether they were around the world or just around a country or a city, bringing this genre of music to life in front of thousands of people. And they didn't just press a button and let music play. They found a way to mesh that electronic aspect with a live performance aspect that completely brought the genre to life and ignited it within the community. That's what helped it grow so much. And so since that genre grew so much, it was able to kind of bleed into that pop music community industry. And so with this information, you might be wondering, all right, well, how is this relevant to me? Maybe I don't listen to electronic music. Maybe you don't really care about music at all that much. Check this out. Here's some things that you can learn from this presentation. So, number 1, you can know your music genres. You might not be an electronic person. Totally fine. Maybe you like country music. Maybe you like hip hop. Maybe just listen to whatever's on the radio. But the key is, all music and every song fits into some genre. It's influenced by some other genre. What you can find is music evolves. And if you look at the top charts, all the songs that have really hit number 1 on all these top played websites, there's something that stays the same between all of them within a certain time frame. Some glue that sticks them all together. And for a time, that glue is future bass. Now, it might not be future bass a year from now, 2 years from now, but what you can learn is you can find patterns. You can find the patterns in all these songs that are becoming super popular. You can follow those patterns to determine what is going to be popular in the future. And something else that helps is you might not know a ton about music, but just taking a keen listen to some of these songs really helps you understand music a little more fundamentally. And so it helps you understand music theory with those chord progressions that I talked about, but also sound design with the distortion that I talked about in that low-end sub bass and those drums that drive the song. And so with all that knowledge that you've gleaned, you find that you really appreciate music a lot more. And I found the same thing for myself. It wasn't just that I found electronic music to be more interesting. I found all music to be more interesting because I took those skills and I applied them to every genre that I knew. And the coolest thing about this all is when you learn all this stuff and you share it with other people, it really makes you sound smart too. So thanks for listening. Thanks for giving me some time. Here are some references so you can check it out for yourself. Some documentaries and some articles written to really bring light to this kind of music. Thanks for your time.